fighting. And one way to do that is through something called Article 5. Now we're talking, people want to say, how real is the Constitution in our lives? Well, the government doesn't seem to care that it even exists, but we all recognize it as the law of the land, as we learned in high school. It is the driving document of what's supposed to be the kind of country we have. And it includes an article that allows us to amend the Constitution. The Founding Fathers, in their great genius, and I admire these men forever, knew that the Constitution that they developed wouldn't be perfect for all time and needed a way to get it amended. But there is a way to amend it that never been done before, and the key thing about it is that the people in Congress have no say in it, and isn't that a wonderful thing? No one's tried it. We're going to try it now, and a man who's going to come up here and tell you how to do that is Mr. Fernando Arce. Convention of States. It's called Convention of States. He'll explain the whole thing to you. Thank you, Fernando. Okay, take it over.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you, Lauren, for giving me the opportunity tonight here to speak on this important matter. My name is Fernando Arce, and I'm district captain here of my local state district in New York City. And this is, of course, the main event. Now, this year is the 5th-year anniversary of the Tea Party movement. And if you stop and look around the room tonight, a lot of us didn't even know each other 5 years ago. So we've grown, we've educated ourselves, and we've volunteered. We volunteered for local and national candidates who are running. And whether we door knocked and wrote letters, and we even manned the phone banks for many of these candidates. A lot of them, some of them good, some of them not so good, right? But that's a whole different topic on the candidates. We even rented buses and driven down to D.C., to the belly of the beast, Washington, D.C., to hold rallies for repeal of Obamacare, for targeting the IRS or other important issues. We've held our signs up to be heard. And to steal a line from Hillary Clinton, what difference does it make now? I asked myself, did I make a difference? Did we make a difference raising our voices? And I only say that because the powers that be, the ones in DC, the permanent political class, the professional politician, continue to hold power, but not only hold their power has grown in the last 5 years. So, I say we stop playing defense. I say we turn the tables on them. We move to the offense, and this is a game changer. This is for all the marbles, guys, if we do it correctly. And we may only have one chance to do it correctly. Okay, so without further ado, I present to you tonight the Convention of States Project. Show of hands here tonight. How many of you heard of Article 5, Convention of States? Good, great, excellent. So we are informed citizens here. And so with that in mind, I'm going to briefly discuss the problem tonight, but I want to more talk about the solution because we are informed Americans, not low information voters, and are awake to the problems we're having here. The 4 abuses, I broke them down into 4 sections. Folks, we have crackheads running Washington, D.C. It's true. Why? Why do I say that? Because it's just like a crackhead who's addicted to rock cocaine, the permanent politician is addicted to spending, debt, and the deficits. And just like a crackhead who takes every penny to support his habit, Washington, D.C. politicians are confiscating our money, our sweat of labor, our fruits of labor, to support their habit of spending. You know the numbers, guys. I don't need to go into too much detail, but we are $17.5 trillion in debt, and that's not counting the unfunded liabilities. If you include Social Security and Medicare, it's $120 trillion that we don't have. It's not right, and it's also immoral, and it's not fair for our children and our grandchildren to be burdened with this debt. Okay, the regulatory crisis. I call it the 4th branch of government. It's unelected bureaucrats who don't get voted in, and Just to show you an example, in 2012 alone, in 1 year, 80,000 pages of new regulations and proposed regulations were presented to the Federal Registry. To give you an example of what that looks like, it's 2 stacks of papers on top of each other, 6 feet tall, twice. So, and those regulations are costing the American people $350 billion for that 1 year alone. You know, a lot of people say, oh, a lot of people that are on the other side say, well, Americans are not taxed like they used to be taxed in terms of our income taxes. But if you think about it, if you add in the regulations that cost us in this country, is over $2 trillion a year. $2 trillion a year of regulations that come out of our pocket to fund these bureaucrats. That's a lot of money. So keep that in mind. Last one, third one, is congressional attacks on state sovereignty. The 10th Amendment states that, and I'm paraphrasing, that the federal government's control is limited and enumerated, and that everything else goes back to the states and the people, we the people. Well, today that doesn't work like that today. And just like Marie, who spoke about the mandates with Common Core, Congress issues today federal grants that are come attached with these mandates. It's blackmail, plain and simple, blackmail. If the federal government says, you want the money? Well, read the fine print, and the fine print are these mandates that are anti-growth and anti-prosperity and takes away our liberties. So today, the states have lost their sovereignty. They've been castrated, whatever you want to call it. They've been neutered, or you could say they've been impotent, and then they usurp their powers back to the federal government. By the way, I'll be holding Q&A after this, okay? And this goes against the 10th Amendment as the framers had put it. Now, the last one here is the federal takeover decision-making process. You know, the framers were geniuses back in their time. And I say that because they took inspiration to draft the Constitution from philosophers like Locke and Montesquieu and the Bible. They understood that it was the nature of man to be corrupt and sinful. And therefore, when you read the Federalist Papers, you would see that they put a lot of time and effort into the separation of powers and the checks and balances in the federal government. Well, today, with the help of a Supreme Court that is filled with activist judges, Supreme Court judges that do not legislate through judicial review through original intent, but are working in collusion with the federal government to continue to grow the Leviathan, as Lawrence puts it, Leviathan government. Now remember, keep note now, and we're seeing this before our eyes in the last couple of years. This is very important. You're witnessing, just as the states have usurped their powers to the federal government, Congress today is usurping their power to the executive branch. Okay, and that's very dangerous. We are moving from a soft tyranny to a hard totalitarian state right now, before our eyes. Incredible. So now you might remember, Obama says, I have a pen and I have a phone. Okay, Mr. President, we have Article 5. Thank you. Yes. Okay. What does this mean? This is not a partisan issue. I agree. This is not about left or right, Republican, Democrat. It's not about the Tea Party versus the Working Family Party. You know which party that is, right? Washington, D.C. will never voluntarily relinquish meaningful power, no matter who is elected. And if you think about it, we had 8 years of Bush, right? We had a Republican in the White House. We had Republicans in both Congress and the Senate for 8 years, and the federal Leviathan, the centralized authoritative government, continued to grow drastically. So it's time for the states and citizens to be proactive and take back their powers as the originalist founding fathers wanted us to have. So we're approaching a crossroads here. One path leads to escalating powers of authoritative centralized government that will lead to bankruptcy of America. And don't think that America cannot go bankrupt. We're not immune from economics 101. Yes, Detroit went bankrupt, but that's one state, and we're talking about the whole country, right? So it can happen, and that's not a pretty picture. And lastly, or we can lead to the path of restoring liberty, a new American renaissance, more individual liberty, more individual freedom, and state sovereignties. Or the crossroads, as those Mark Levin fans out there say, one of his title of his books, the crossroads can either lead to liberty or tyranny. So you decide. I know which road I want to be on. Okay, the good news. Now we're going to get to the solution. On September 15th, 1787, Saturday, 2 days before the closing of the Constitution Convention in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Independence Hall, George Mason stood up and declared and debated that language in Article 5 needed to be adjusted, and so that 2/3 of the states can also call for a convention, because before that, only the Congress could call for a convention. So that was critical. Thank God George Mason stood up, because if he wouldn't have stood up, I wouldn't be here in front of you, standing with you. This is the language of the Article 5. I'll read it to you quickly here. The language in red is what applies to us tonight. Article 5, the Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to the Constitution, or on the application of legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention proposing amendments, which, in either case, shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution. When ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by Congress. So there you have it in black and white. This is a peaceful and lawful way to take back our country, to reduce this centralized power grab that we're seeing today in federal government. The chart here shows the amendment process number 1. And if you know history, the last 237 years, we've had 27 amendments, and this is how the amendment process operates through the traditional process where Congress proposes the amendments and goes back to the states for ratification. Amendment process number 2. Amendment proposed by a convention of states, called at the request of 2/3 of state legislators, and again goes back to the states for ratification. Now, a little bit of history here, because I know we have a lot of history buffs, right, Lawrence? Okay. There's actually been 32 convention of states in the history of this republic. 20 of them before the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Regional conventions among a number of states. There was a national convention held in Washington, D.C. in 1860 to avoid secession from the southern states. Okay? The last convention was a regional convention of states in 1922 in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and 7 other states who got together to come in agreement on how the Colorado River Pact was to be divided up among the 7 states. So there is precedence here for a convention of states through the courts. Okay, the process. This is pretty much the nuts and bolts of how this process works. 34 states submit application on the same issue. Congress is required to call a convention, and that's all where you'll see Congress and DC is involved, right here, number 2. Call a convention. What does that mean? Set a date and place. Hopefully it won't be Washington, D.C. I like, my personal opinion, like to see it back at Federal Philadelphia, Independence Hall. I would love to see it there, or the estate of Mount Vernon, Washington's estate in Virginia. Third, commissioners debate. Who are commissioners? Commissioners are the delegates that the state legislators choose. They propose, they vote upon possible amendments. 4, proposed amendments are sent to the states for ratification. Lastly, if 38 states ratify, this proposed amendment becomes part of the Constitution and becomes law. The founders knew the federal government might one day become drunk with abuse and power, which brings me to a famous quote from P.J. O'Rourke. Quote, "Giving the federal government money and power is like giving whiskey and keys to a teenage boy." Okay, so secondly, I believe the founding fathers were thinking of our generation when they put this language in Article 5. I believe it's time now to break glass and pull level, because we're running out of time, guys. The window is closing on us. I don't recognize my country as I did 5-10 years ago. I don't know about you guys. Okay? So by calling it Convention of States, we can stop the federal spending and the debt spree, the power grabs of the federal courts, who are in collusion with the federal government here today, and other misuses of the federal power. Okay, this is a recent survey done with 2 Americans here in America. Which amendments do you support? Okay, what's that? Term limits. So that's very popular. Balanced budget. Clarified general welfare clause. That's been abused. The welfare clause has been abused, as well as the commerce clause, to grow the federal leviathan, and upper limits on taxation, which is tax reform, on income tax reform. Okay, how our proposal is different. Another little bit of history. There's actually been 400 applications for submission submitted in history, but there was never a convention. 400 applications have been submitted in the history of this country, but there's never been a convention. Why? Because the subject matter was ununiformly of the matter. So you have to be careful. These states have to make sure that the subject matter is uniform within all 34 states in order to hold a convention. The founders of Citizen for Self-Governance, a little bit of the organization, Mark Meckler, Californian, rancher, great guy. He's the co-founder of the Tea Party Patriots. Hello, Tea Party. Michael Farris, a Constitution expert. He's also the founder of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, 30 years of grassroots leadership in all 50 states. So guys, we have the dream team here. We have a grassroots expert who can get the grassroots movement. And this is a grassroots movement, believe me. And we have Mr. Farris, who actually litigated in the Supreme Court for Article 5 and won. How you like that? So great leaders here. Okay, the 2 goals, quickly. First goal is to call a convention for a particular subject rather than a particular amendment. That's critical. We've had Congress propose amendments, the BBA, Balanced Budget Amendment in the 90s. It lost by 1 vote, a Republican. The senator in Alaska, Murkowski. Okay? So, the subject matter is here. This is paraphrasing it. For the purpose of limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. Remember, guys, we're playing offense here. We are playing against a seasoned, trained, ruthless team that's backed with a lot of money. We must attack them in several fronts. That's why you just can't have one amendment. You have to have a complete package of restraints. This way, by having that, we can get them in a number of different fronts and win. I want to win. Okay, the second goal, this is where you guys come in. We need to build a strong network of grassroots support. Today, we have over 10,000 volunteers in the Convention of States, and it's growing. It's picking up momentum. And number 2, build a political operation in a minimum of 40 states. Of course, we are looking for all 50 states, including New York. That's why you have 50 states down here. But we'd like to have 40 because, again, you need 38 for ratification, so we need a little cushion. What presentation would be great without a quote from Washington? Okay, liberty, when it begins to take root, is a plant of rapid growth. Amen. Okay, now we talked about the goal. Let's talk about the plan. The plan is to have a political operation in at least 3,000 of the 4,000 state houses, districts in 40 states. Every state has 100 districts, right? So if we can just get 3,000 out of those 4,000 districts and get 3,000 district captain, which is what my title is, and organize 100 people in that district. There's one district captain for every legislative state district. And here we have the 3 state leadership positions: state director, legislative liaison, and coalition director. This here chart shows the chain of command, and this is why they call it grassroots. See? Grassroots. It's local, state, and national. So it's well-organized organization. Okay, the latest news before we wrap it up. Last week, June 13, 2014, over 100 state legislators representing 32 states already. This has only been going on for 8 months. Got together at the second Mount Vernon Assembly. Well, what's a Mount Vernon Assembly? Well, this assembly is a precursor to the Convention of States. Here is where we set up the rules and procedures in order to have that Convention of States. You got to have rules and procedures. We're not, anarchists here. 22 states have already offered resolutions in their respected states for a convention already in 8 months. 3 states have, of course, approved the resolution in both houses: Georgia, Florida, and Alaska. 3. We need 34, guys, and we need New York. Okay. This here map shows the number of states already participating in this project. So it's taken root, it's taken momentum, and I'm sorry. Sure, I'm color happy here, no problem. The green represents the states that were at the assembly, Mount Vernon Assembly. The purple, oh my God. The purple says no thank you at this moment. There you go, California, Illinois, and New York, sorry. The ones in white represent that they are on hold with their invitation. They're working to get these delegates to the next, which is going to be the last assembly in December. That'll be the last assembly. After that, we're going to shoot for the convention. Okay? Just to wrap it up here, guys. How can you help? How can you help? Well, we need you to, I'm going to have my assistant right now. Join our team. Sign up at the Action Center. I'm going to pass out my business cards. And I want you guys to log in, get familiar with the website. It's a very user-friendly website. It's an awesome website, I think. You go there, you register through your, just pass it out. You register through your zip code, and you'll get automatically shot to your state senator and your assemblyman. And the letters is there. All you gotta just plug in your email. You can email it to them, and you can even fax it to them. You don't do the faxing. The organization is doing it for you at their out-of-pocket costs. And you can call your state assemblies and your state representative. So it's important that you educate yourself, your circles, your power of influence. Donate if you would like to donate. And again, visit the website, like them on Facebook. We have over 125,000 Americans on Facebook already. So it's awesome. So in conclusion on this presentation, I like to quote a verse in the Bible, and it's fitting because we are in a house of worship. And I want to make sure my phone is on, so now NSA and the IRS can hear me loud and clear. 2 Corinthians 16, verse 2. Now, the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty and freedom. Folks, my countrymen, we need to fight for less government and more freedom. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Fernando. Now please stand and wait so we have some Q&A for you. Mr. Schwartz, you have a question? Okay, so the steps to actually make the convention happen? Okay, please review the steps.
Absolutely. That's a very good question. Before I answer that question, I also want to give recognition. the State Director of the Convention of State is here with us tonight. Valerie Fudstein, if you could stand up and wave. If you have any questions at the end of the presentation, please out. Valerie. And also, I have another district captain here, Mary. Mary's here. She's a district captain from Staten Island. Thank you for coming. Thank you for supporting. All right. Sorry. Well, Congress can ignore it, and the reason they cannot ignore calling a convention, which is the term you want to use, is because there is precedent. There's 237 years of judicial review precedents on that issue. So, no, they cannot ignore that. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Right. Oh, right. I get that a lot. I'm gonna answer your question if you say that. I get that a lot. Listen. The professional politician in DC, the DC is not ignoring the Constitution. They are following the Constitution. Where we have a problem here is that the courts, the Supreme Court justices are misinterpreting the Constitution. They're reinterpreting it. Okay? So it's not that we have a problem with the Constitution. It's just that we need to We need to clarify the Constitution so that there are no possible playing with the words that we have today. Okay? Thank you. Yes, question. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, for those of you in the back, this question is that there is a movement on the left to also have a convention of states. How can we avoid the commissioners mentioned in Fernando's presentation from leaning that way and creating a whole convention that'll do all the things we don't want happening at all? How do we stop that?
Very good question. That's another very common question. Well, I like to answer it in a number of different fronts here. The myth is that this convention of states will have a runaway convention. That is the myth. The reality is that the federal government is a runaway government at the moment. The federal government is runaway. Every day they're running away from us, number one. Number two, if you look at the procedures, and yes, the states that were in purple, they're liberal states, they're progressive states, and they will bring delegates who also support their philosophy of those states. Fine. Okay, now what? How many states have that same philosophy? Remember, today, 27 states have double R's. What does double R mean? Both House, Senate, and Assembly. 27 out of 50. In addition to that, the left, I shouldn't say the left, the progressive have about 13 or 17 I believe, 17 states that are controlled by the Democrats. There's 13 states up for grabs. Out of those 13 states, half of those legislators are Republicans. So to answer your question, Vicky, which is a great question, do you really think there are 38 states who have the same philosophy of the Progressive Party to have these amendments ratified? I don't. John Boehner has nothing to do with this. This is the great news. This does not go through DC. It goes through the states legislative. Next question.
I also add one more thing. In your presentation, Fernando, you said how you have to specify the subject matter, and your example was limiting the power of the federal government. What liberal is going to get behind that, right? So they wouldn't even be, they'd have to change, they'd have to put up a different subject so it wouldn't qualify. It wouldn't get you have to have, 34 states have the same subject matter, and that's not going to happen. That can't happen. Another question. Mary, you have one? Okay. Oh, okay. Is there potential downside to this process, some danger that would come from this process that could come from it?
Well, the downside is we do nothing, and everything stays the same and gets worse. Okay. There is other possibilities. We can start voting for representatives that have our same philosophy, but good luck with that. Like I said, we had 8 years of Bush. How did that do? You know? Oh. Downsides to go through the process? No, I don't believe there is, and thank God that.
Okay. Another question in the back somewhere?
Yes, Michael.
First time presentation for Mr. Arce. Good. Very good job. Thank you. Support. Yes. Thank you, Mike. That's right. It's a wonder. We don't know why the states. Well, you mentioned it before. They're being bought off. That's the process that has to stop. The federal government learned a long time ago how to buy the states off, and it's been working. Another question for Fernando? Michael? Okay, he's talking about the radio talk show host Michael Medved, who's a pretty staunch conservative, but he was not in support of this idea. There is, within the conservative movement in America, there is, right now I would say it's fair to say, there's a mixed reaction to the concept, because some people don't think it's ever going to work, or there's the runaway convention fear and so on. But like Fernandez keeps saying, I would say, well, you can expand on it, but we have to do something. I mean, we're all sitting around and we're saying, oh my God, our government's out of control, taking away our freedoms, spending like crazy. What can we do about it? This is a process that the Founding Fathers gave us, and it's still around. I think we should try it.
Amen. Amen to that. Thank you, Lawrence. Yes, go ahead, Michael. Yes. No. Yes, there was no amendments proposed on those assemblies, the Mount Vernon assemblies. Those are just strictly for procedural and rules for the convention. We're already planning this for to actually have the convention. So it's, by the way, it's one state, one vote with these delegates at the convention. One state, one vote. Now, who decides which delegates go to the party? The state's legislators decide how many people, how many of them can go. It could be 2, it could be 4, it could be 6. Doesn't matter. It's one state, one vote. The way I like to see it is, if there's a state that has a liberal and a Republican, there should be 2 Republicans, 1 for each house, and 2 liberals. That's 4 per state. That's controllable with 34 states. Mike Medved is playing on the John Birch Society that believed, number one, that the Constitution was designed without permission from the states. It's like it was a runaway convention. That's what the John Birch believe. It's, I hate to use the word fear-mongering, but they're out there. They're fear-mongering. So, question, last question.
Last question, go ahead. I think I can answer that. The decision made at the convention, what Fernando's been trying to show you tonight is that this process leads to amending the Constitution exactly the way it's been done before, except how it gets started is all different, and Congress, Michael Medved is wrong. Congress has no say in it. By the law, they have to call the convention. They just have some say in terms of where and when. But they have to call it if we get enough 34 states to call for it on the same subject matter. Okay? But once it becomes an amendment, it's still the law. Now, you're right. Our current administration doesn't seem to care with the Constitution. That's still a big problem. But if, for example, we put in the term limits thing, that's my favorite. Who here supports the term limits thing as number one thing? There you go. Because that's going to solve a lot of the other problems, isn't it? Because there won't be these absolute power hungry types anymore down there. If that becomes in the Constitution, and let's say somebody decides, I'm not going to pay attention to that anymore, and Eric Holder says, okay, it's okay, you can do that, and the guy runs for a 3rd term when he's only allowed for 2, what do you think kind of support he's going to get? Unless he can pull off a Michael Bloomberg and get an extra term built in because of some kind of deal he makes with the city council. But how is that going to look to people if somebody in the federal government, a senator or whoever, decides, I'm not going to pay attention to this new law in the Constitution? It'll never work. It'll be a public relations nightmare. It can only work in New York for Michael Bloomberg, but it can't work on the federal level. Then they can't just ignore something like that, in my opinion. You're right. There's always a question of this, but I think in this case it wouldn't be a problem because.
My fear is we're going to be in a war, but we can't change administration. That's a direction that we're headed.
Well, that's not in the Constitution, Sam. It's not in the Constitution. If Obama decides he's going to stay president in 2016, 2017. What do you think the reaction would be in this country to that? He just had a poll, his worst poll ever came out yesterday. It's a nightmare for him. Yeah, good point. Well, does anybody here believe that if Barack Obama decides he doesn't want to leave the presidency, he'll be able to go on for a 3rd term? Who believes that's possible? He's got the what on the books for? one more time, I want to ask the question clearly. Please raise your hand if you think that if Barack Obama decides in 2016 that he's going to run again, regardless of what the Constitution says, he's going to cancel the election. Okay. Who thinks he can get away with that? Who's not sure what would happen if Barack Obama decided to cancel the election? Who's not sure what would happen? Okay, I guess maybe no one's sure, but I gotta believe, well, that's a good question. I guess you got a point there, Jude. My friends Jude and Nira came over from Manhattan. Jerry came from Manhattan. Thank you for all coming out all the way out here to Northeast Queens. And everybody else, of course, that came from far away. I know one came from way out in Suffolk, exit 61, there you go. Okay, so we're all so committed to this cause that we're willing to make sacrifices to get here, and that's great. I see you chomping at the bit to want to say something. Okay, introduce her, please.
I'm Italian.
Come here.
I'm Valerie Funstein.
Wait, we have an Italian here. What a surprise in Queens.
I understand all your.
Introduce yourself, please.
Valerie Funstein, and you know Fernando did such a great job. I'm so appreciative. It's awesome. But I would like to say that you know we all have our ideas of how the government should be run. We all do. We all think we know best. We all think we know exactly the solution for our country. This is just one of them. So we have to get behind the ones we believe in. We have to make a difference. And the Tea Party, you guys have done already monumental things to transform our country, as much as Barack Obama would like to say otherwise, and as much as NBC would like to say otherwise. But I'm telling you that this is the opportunity to do something via the Constitution, the way our founding fathers intended. We can argue all day, what are the intentions of Barack Obama? We can argue all day, what are the intentions of Eric Holder? But that's really not what we're here to do right now. We have to take one step at a time. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. If an election's canceled, believe me, I'll stand right with you. But right now, we have to do what's within our right. We're law-abiding citizens. We're going to do what's right for the problems that we see right now. Let's not create problems and try to figure out how to solve those, because we got plenty already.
Okay. Thank you very much, Valerie. Thank you very much. And I want to thank Fernando Arce for his wonderful presentation on the Convention of States. And I hope you will all take the card that he gave you and follow through on what he's asking you to do. Okay, so I know it's a hot night, and so I really appreciate you coming out and staying here through the whole entire program. We're all patriots who love our country. The Constitution is a gift to us. It's a gift to us from brilliant men who, thank God, came to this earth and decided that they were going to make things the way they're supposed to be, not the way it had been forever. And think of what the challenge they faced back in the 1770s. They were talking about upheaving the entire system that people had become used to for centuries and saying, whoa, wait a minute, the people are going to be in charge of their own destiny? And they said, yes, we're going to do exactly that. And now we've been losing that over the last few, I would say, going back almost 100 years now, to the 1913 with the Federal Reserve and the federal income tax, Woodrow Wilson and his progressivism, and it's been building from there. It might take us 100 years to get it back to the way it was, but we're going to start the fight, and we're going to keep fighting starting right tonight. Thank you for coming. Good night.